This is Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Inspiring and providing real insight to our listeners with every story. Exploring deep stories behind every guest. Please welcome your host, Bo Tiffany.
Hey Mira, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me back.
I'm excited to see you. I know your journey has, already been long, but it's gotten longer since the last time we talked. And why don't we just kind of give a small synapse of what's going on if people didn't catch that first episode. And I encourage you all listeners to check that out. So just kind of give us a synapse of your background and your history and what's going on, and we'll kind of go from there. Okay?
Yeah, you bet. So previously on the first podcast that we did, I was active on the pancreas kidney transplant list, as well as donors were coming in as live donors for kidney only. And they were being screened 3 at a time. However, they had a very large list. By they, I mean UW Health had a very large list, and I was told to not focus my energy anymore on finding a donor. Before, when we did our podcast, I wasn't on dialysis, and I could walk. So those things have changed since then with how weak I am from stage 5 kidney failure. I can't walk without assistance. Either that being a walker or a wheelchair, but I'm not supposed to be walking on my foot. So I am doing that a little bit when I have to get around.
People
appointments.
People might not know about the foot. So, we talk sometimes about full circle, and this started with an infection in the foot. And here we are full circle having to deal with the foot again, which ended up, knocking you off the transplant list, temporarily, while you had that dealt with. So when people are hearing you being off of your foot, that's the reason why Mira had another surgery to address. Was it an infection again in your foot, or what was going on?
I've actually been off the list now twice, once at UW Health and then once here at University of Illinois, because of my foot. So the first time it was identified there was a bone infection. They went in, cleared that out. Then you have to be on antibiotics for so long. And then IV antibiotics were infused also. And then this past time, I was like, from my medication, from my low blood sugars, from the stage 5 kidney failure, I had blacked out twice. Called the ambulance, went to UW Health, got transferred to Miranda, and there they identified that they thought I had another bone infection. They did MRIs, ultrasounds, blood flows, and my insurance denied that stay, saying I wasn't ill enough. So that's under appeal right now, as well as the $1,600 medical bill from the ambulance. And that was after my insurance paid out over $800 for that.
Wow.
So we have that too. They thought I had another bone infection. They went in. They then transferred me. They wanted to work on the foot. They wanted to remove the bone altogether. And they were talking about amputation at that point.
Is this because it was recurring?
Correct. And they thought it was the same bone, same infection. So I went to Freighter, where I have my foot surgeon, and he immediately was like, we are not removing this foot. We are not removing this bone. Let's do a white blood cell count. So we did this test, which shows if you have infection. The bone came back negative. The callus on the bottom came back negative, and there was some sort of fluid infection in the foot, but nothing to drain. So he did scrape the bone, and he took all these cultures, and I'm on an antibiotic by UW Health, infectious disease, for something that doesn't exist. The cultures came back negative.
Wow.
So she says she put me on this because of the previous infection, but yet she wants me to stay on it for the rest of the month. even though medically speaking, I don't have this infection. So Freidert, I have the foot surgeon there. I think he is like the best thing ever. He was like, look, you don't need to be on this antibiotic. What's going on? And the antibiotic makes me dizzy. When I take it, about maybe like a half hour later, I'm ready to pass out. By pass out, I mean not go to sleep, which I do a lot because of kidney failure, but I like to stand. I've hit the floor. And it had nothing to. It's just this side effect of this antibiotic.
So let me stop and just kind of moderate this for a second. When you and I talked last time, you were considering dialysis, but you weren't committed to it yet, and I made you promise me, if you remember, to make that bridge. And so that's something that you've been doing since then. I kind of want to go a little bit chronologically so that we can get a good understanding of what's happened since then. So we started out, you had a foot infection that ended up not being caught in time and spread to other parts of your body that ended up causing your organs to shut down. Is that
correct?
Kind of okay. And so that's kind of what started this journey for you. And you had the ball dropped more than once on your road to getting a donor, which has caused you to change hospitals where you were being treated in order to, actually get the care that you need. And you've learned a lot through those experiences. So can we kind of baby step it from there and let's talk about that part of the journey?
Absolutely. So in September, I was getting real weak, and had an inability to almost walk at that point. I was at physical therapy and I fell down outside the curb. Of course, they rushed right out, and essentially picked me up. So I started to lose that ability. My kidney numbers started to tank. So at that point, I needed dialysis. At that point, I didn't have a foot infection. I was active on the list, and this was going to be a bridge. So they put in this catheter port. It's a port into my skin on my shoulder, on my right shoulder, with two catheter lines hanging out. I hide them. I tuck them in. I always wear a tank top underneath my shirt, so I tuck them into that so that nobody can see. But, when I look at all my clothes, Bo, I don't wear 3/4 of them because you could see my port. So now that is my number one focus. And, Bo, it's been really hard for me. What I looked like last year compared to what I look like now. People are like, oh, you look way better than we thought you would. Well, I'm still really ill. My kidneys are failing. Anything I eat and or drink has to come off on dialysis. Sometimes they want you to do extra treatments of dialysis, which is just your body is so weak that one time I even canceled the next day. They had me lined up for 2 days in a row, and my body couldn't take it.
What is it about dialysis that makes you weak?
Yeah, so, some people it makes weak, some people it doesn't. Unfortunately, my body just can't take it. And it's been identified that my body can't take all the blood out of its system at one time that they are pulling. And there's really nothing that we can do about it. We fought high blood pressures of 250. I've gone to the hospital. The other day, my blood pressure tanked to 71. I was seeing stars, a cold sweat. I'm like, oh my gosh. And they came over and gave me fluid. But that's the last thing a dialysis patient wants is fluid. I've been to the hospital a number of times, which I was told would happen. Like, you will be so ill, you will have to go to the emergency room. But the emergency room sucks at UW Health. Like, you wait for 6 hours. Or they're like, oh, get her in right away and give her a bag of fluid. well, you don't want to be giving a dialysis patient fluid. Like, what are you doing?
Let's talk about that. What did they set for expectations for this part of the journey?
I was told by a director at UW Health that I would feel like I was dying before I got a transplant. And that is absolutely true. I'm a little bit stronger right now, only based on the medication that they gave me. But you can only get it every 2 weeks. Your numbers have to be in line. And when I don't get that shot, I am weak. I can barely sit up in bed. So I have that right now. But otherwise, they told me you'd be weak. You will be in the hospital. Prepare yourself for that days at a time. And you will feel like death. I have felt that. I literally thought that this was the end at some points and been at the hospital or what have you. It's miserable. And Bo, as a single person, and when it's 2:00 in the morning and you're going to pass out again for the third time in the day, you have to take an ambulance. There's no one here to help or take you. And then it's a matter of getting home, right? So there's that. My face is really puffy, which is a side effect of I need dialysis again tonight. And then eventually, so along this way, I was active on the pancreas kidney list for 5 months at UW Health. And I had a ton of donors. Again, I wasn't supposed to spend my energy focusing on more donors. Unfortunately, my coordinator was not a good match for me. And the donor coordinator, was responding to people with, I'll get to you if I need you. There was also, Bo, in this time that happened, one of the donors who actually used to work at UW Health, it was noted in her chart by the donor coordinator that the recipient, being me, is no longer requesting a kidney. She got a hold of these notes, and she has demanded that they be changed. I never said that. She never said that. Bo, I need a kidney.
Absolutely. One thing here in Wisconsin is lack of accountability, lack of transparency, and I'm speaking directly about the medical system. There's several things here in Wisconsin that really prevents victims from getting justice, but then that also prevents the hospital system from learning because things are covered up rather than exposed so that people can learn from those experiences. What have you noticed in your own tribulations with UW Health as you were, dealing with trying to get a transplant, trying to take care of yourself? You mentioned you were single, and having to do this on your own. How are you? And I want to mention too that you have maintained your job and working, and throughout all of this, you're juggling so much without a huge support net other than your friends. Your friends have been amazing. I think, there's a lot to be said for any of them that are listening. I had a conversation with you recently. I said, usually you can count your friends in one hand when you die. I think you're fortunate to be able to have many, many more friends that are true to you than the average person. And that's a true blessing that might have come out of this, or it might have just been a blessing from your life that's come to fruition. Either way, it's really great to see your friends pull together as they have. But, friends and family, they have no power to help in a situation like this, unless you give power of attorney to someone and let them make your decisions, which I wouldn't want to do. I'm sure you wouldn't either, unless it was like a spouse or something. I don't see an avenue or steps that we can take other than raising awareness and raising our voice, because digital voices is not just about me talking or you talking. It's about us talking about larger topics that are important, today that really aren't being addressed by the network news. And they're affecting each and every one of us, our families, our friends. Everyone here in Wisconsin is dealing with the same issues. God forbid you have a health issue come about and something goes wrong. And it shouldn't be like that. We recently had our first patient safety advocacy day? I think it was last year. So Christine Sinicki, who I've tried to tie together with you, is responsible for getting that day of exposure at least started. And another guest that I've had that's been huge in this movement is Steve Burrows, whose mother was killed by an incident with Aurora. And, he created a movie to spread his awareness. I started a podcast to spread mine. And together, these voices come together as people are sharing their story. And because we're all friends and family within our state for the most part, at some point when enough voices are heard, then hopefully change will come, because it'll be hard to ignore at that point. And that's my goal. I think that's the only way that change is going to come here in Wisconsin, is by exposing some of what I like to call corporate, corporate corruption or political corruption. That's my opinion. I always put that disclaimer in there. But you see it repetitively. You see it with almost every aspect of our government and every aspect of a lot of organizations across the board. And I think that needs to change. And you and I had this talk about like idealisms and how long it takes for generational ideas to change. And we finally have this moment in time where we have all these political figures that are getting to be 80 years old. And I mean, they're either going to die or they're going to retire. They've hung on as long as they possibly can. But the new blood that's coming in are bringing new ideals and new ways of thinking that, are a generational change from the ones that are leaving. And I hope that gets us a little bit closer to transparency and accountability. Sorry, I've been so long-winded, but I have a lot to say on this topic. So.
Yeah, Bo, I've experienced some of this along the way. So, for example, I was doing a television interview with a local news station, looking for a kidney and kind of what has happened along the way. They blocked out the entire portion of what has happened with UW Health. And they also didn't put in any of their information. I actually had a meeting with one of my really good friends. Her name's Samantha. She came along with me. It was a virtual meeting with an operations director at UW Health, and we identified their gaps in the system. And we explained these gaps to her, and she's like, we know about them. We have it in email writing that they know about these gaps. So when you would apply to be a donor, for example, you would get a message saying you will be contacted in 7 business days. Those business days came and went. Sometimes it was a week. Sometimes it was a month. These donors are now calling them and getting emails or being told back, if we need you, we'll come to you. Like, that's it. One sentence. Just very inappropriate on how their response was when they had just dropped the ball on something and their system clearly isn't working. Right. Then they test 3 donors at a time. And I had a large pool of donors for 5 months, Bo. It was nothing. So here I still sit. I went on that list in April, so it's been a year. A little over a year.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So you, as a result of what we just talked about, were determined then that, to find care somewhere else. You'd found out some things like you explained, and now you ended up getting into another hospital network, correct?
Correct.
What did they tell you about the whys behind what you went through?
The surgeon looked at me and said, went like this with his fingers, making the money sign, and said, their loss, our gain. You clearly weren't the member of the right country club or did not donate millions of dollars. But the reason I believe that to be true is from everything I've seen. And there was someone who donated over $10 million. Within 2 months, she had a kidney transplant and was out of the hospital in 2 days. They don't like to speak about that. I mean, they can't speak about another patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that is I was told to stop speaking about that incident.
Why?
Because I would be in the hospital for longer than that, but they wouldn't give me a reason. My coordinator wouldn't give me a reason. And she had nothing. When I would bring up about the whole 2 months business, she had nothing to say. And when someone goes quiet, usually there's a reason why,
mm-hmm.
right? So we struggled with that. And just my coordinator in general, like getting a hold of her was tough. She talked down to me. She would set appointments and be like, you need to be here. Do you understand? Well, I'm not 5. And of course, I need this kidney. I'm going to be wherever you tell me I need to be.
Right.
So that's all happened.
It's I'll jump how high, right?
Exactly. And Bo, that's what I said to them. You tell me to jump, I'm going to ask how high. And, in that, when I was searching out somewhere new, there were 3 places that I was looking at. And here's what I learned along the way. That let's say I'm on the University of Illinois transplant list, but I also am on Northwestern's transplant list. They're pulling from the same pool in Illinois, the same pool of either someone who's unfortunately passed and I could use their kidney and pancreas, or my donor pool. So at this point, they do things a little bit differently. University of Illinois does it 1 person at a time. And, I have something to say about that as well. But I also learned directly from Northwestern that they're pulling from the same pool of people. So it doesn't matter. It's just a matter of which hospital I like more in Illinois. Right. I also did some interviewing with Mayo up in Rochester, Minnesota. And I was at a point where I did all my virtual interviews, and then I had to go up there for a day and a part of a morning. At that point, we were so ready to go with University of Illinois that I canceled that. I have now called them to get that restarted, just so I have more options, because they're pulling from Minnesota. Illinois is pulling from Illinois. And of course, there's more people in Illinois than there is Wisconsin. So bigger possibility.
One thing I like to say about Illinois, as I dealt with my own medical malpractice issues within the state of Wisconsin, I had contacted attorneys from Illinois looking for representation because I couldn't find anybody here in the state to take a case like that, period, on contingency. And even if you're paying out of pocket, the medical malpractice cap is so low that it's going to cost you more money for the lawsuit. But for a rich person, I think that's peace of mind. There's a certain amount of mental health that goes into being able to represent your case. And there's a certain amount of mental health damage that occurs when you're prevented from even getting the attention that it deserves, especially if it's really egregious. And so that's really a disappointing thing in the state. But when I called the people in Illinois, the various attorneys, one of the things that they said is, we know about Wisconsin and we're trying to make Illinois not like that, which really encouraged me to at least the knowledge of Wisconsin's healthcare system and the acknowledgement by Illinois that we're not going to we're not going to copy that model. It does more harm than good. It costs us more money, in the long run via the injuries to these patients, and I think we need to get to a spot with transparency and accountability. I keep bringing that up a lot with medical cases, but that's the one thing that they want to hide, isn't it? They don't want the truth out there, and when it is, they censor it, like you had experience with your news.
Bo, when I did that news and my coordinator found out I was doing a news interview, she got real excited. By real excited, I mean she was not happy. And I think it was because she knew I was about to call it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I still did it. Of course, it was blocked, and things that have happened. And, University of Illinois, like, they're not perfect, like, but I'm a very hands-on person. Even though when I'm weak, it sucks. It really sucks to, like, try. But, for example, January 4th was my first interview with them down in Rockford, Illinois. Went really well. They were mostly phone interviews besides meeting the surgeon and a coordinator. And at my 1 o'clock appointment in the office was going to be a phone interview. You have to interview with social workers. The social worker said, "Oh, well, you live in Wisconsin, but you're physically in Illinois right now doing this phone interview. I can't do phone interviews." And that was the end of it. And I said even the coordinator called her and was like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I don't know. I think this is how it has to happen." And my coordinator was like, "Well, just last week we did the same thing with someone else from Wisconsin. What are you talking about?" So, Bo, it took them a month and a half. I finally got in with the social worker in downtown Chicago, February 25th. So this whole time, an extra month of waiting, and finally met with them. And then they needed another heart test, which is kind of normal on the scheme of things. So that then took a couple of days. The coordinator was trying to rush it for me because they had already dropped the ball once, right? And so we got the heart test done. Everything cleared, of course. My heart is strong, even though I can feel my dialysis port pulling at my heart, which really sucks. It causes some pain. So we got that ball all rolling. And then the donor had to go to Chicago and get some blood. Top donor had to go to Chicago and get some blood work done. So since February 25th until now, the donor, for example, still has some x-rays that need to be done in Rockford, Illinois. And I believe those are scheduled, she said. But I have other donors behind her who, like, want to do this. And they're very capable of it. To see if that they're a match. So right now it's just kind of like this waiting game. And I am no longer on the UW Health transplant list. I got a letter from them on November 1st after no contact for quite a while that due to my inability to work with their providers, which never I was willing to work with anybody, I was being dropped from their list. And during this time, I had a bone infection as well, so I was inactive at the time, but still on the list. Dialysis also counts. It, like, gives you an extra bump on the list, let's call it. So if you're on dialysis, it'll kind of bump you ahead of somebody else, depending on how long you've been on it. So, for example, when I was active on the list, I was second. And then I got bumped to third because the other person had been on dialysis for a year. So it's like this little game.
It blows my mind, as I listen to this, because there's efficiency issues that are costing lives, and whether it's the efficiency of not having enough money for certain hospitals to get the care that you deserve and need, or inefficiency to process more than one donor so that you can actually find out if they're a match, truly a match. you have 10 people in line per se, and you're only testing the first one, like why not X, Y, and Z with at least a few or a couple, to heighten the chances that you have a successful donor match.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot there that I'm hearing. What other things are you seeing that could be improved, at least within this part of our story? Because we're going to talk about dialysis and some of the other experiences that you've had. And I like to talk about the problems, but I'd like to also try to look at the solutions too. So what have you noticed, within the coordination part of things? What are the main issues that you're seeing?
So, Bo, one of the big ones is the lack of home care. And by home care, I don't mean necessarily like home health, right? Because I have that. But I'm talking about home aid, such as the little things like work around the house that you need done, or the garbage taken out because you can't get out there. Vacuuming. I can't stay balanced, right, to stand. How am I going to vacuum or sweep, things like that? So just home aid in general, they don't even talk about it in the hospital, but it is so needed. Needed, wanted. So the lack thereof, nobody speaks about it. Like when you leave the hospital, they should give you a list. Here's home health care aid, right? And don't get me wrong, there's a disability program in Wisconsin, ADRC. I don't qualify for anything because I am working. And working is really difficult for me, Bo, because I have to stay energized. If I'm leading a project or leading a group of people, they're like, oh, Mira, you sound okay today. But when I get off the phone now, I'm not okay. I won't be talking for the next few hours because it hurts to talk. Sometimes it hurts to breathe. And there are all side effects of dialysis. So that would be, one thing that I would love is that when you left, you got a list of home health aid and they can help you. Whether maybe you need your prescriptions picked up, something. How am I going to get into the CVS Target when I have to walk in when I'm not supposed to be walking?
So there are things that you're really hitting on the head, and there's a couple that aren't, that you might just not be aware of. So at least on prescriptions, a lot of places and pharmacies will do free delivery. And so that helps at least with some of that, but you're absolutely right on some of the other. I'm we're sponsored, and so I started Digital Voices to gain a voice for some of these issues and to raise awareness. And because of the medical malpractice issues and then the subsequent issues that I found in the system, I ended up creating Home Care Coordinators of Wisconsin. And we're doing exactly what you're talking about, which is coordinating care. The largest issue for a lot of people is who's paying for it. And it costs a good bit of money to have someone come to your home, and I understand all the different aspects of it now, and the insurance and the costs, but I also see a lot of greed within my profession. And that's another thing that I think is important, giving value for what you're charging and charging appropriately rather than scalping everyone that you can. I think that, this idea of the one with the most toys wins is this horrible ideology that's fed to us at an early age. And we need to look at the bigger picture, especially with healthcare. Everybody has a right to healthcare and care in general. We pay taxes, and some of us have served, some of us are teachers, there's a lot of things in the community that we need to be supporting. And it's all underlined by healthcare, because if you don't have good health, what do you have, right? Mm-hmm. And making something that's already a sucky situation that you have to medically be seen for turns it into something so much more devastating. And I've heard people say, doctors say, if you give us an opportunity, we'll kill you, and it's because there's so many errors within the system and this lack of accountability. That's the thing that really frustrates me. We know the problems, but there's not really much for whistleblower protection. And when it comes down to it, the almighty dollar seems to sweeten a lot of pockets to the point where people play along with this rather than, we're all human at the end of the day. And sometimes, the one with the most morals loses, it seems like. You have to operate in this unethical way. And that's the thing that I don't think is sustainable, because most of us we're good-meaning, good-hearted, kind people, and the last thing we'd want to do is hurt our neighbor, right?
Yeah.
So, this is why we're talking today. Going forward for you, you've obviously had to switch hospitals. You've been taken off the donor list repeatedly. The doctors are telling you you're going to feel like you want to die or that you are dead by the time you get the kidney. I know that an average wait list on a donor list is around 8 months. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
And you're at how many months right now?
We're at a year and a month.
So, devastating,
It really is, especially when Bo, I can't quite describe to you or anybody listening what it's like to go on dialysis. My first appointment was 2.5 hours, and I cried the entire time. You walk into this place, there's 16 chairs of all sorts of people hooked up in different ways, arms, catheter ports, you name it. There's no privacy. Doctors, PAs, they speak to you. Everyone else can hear you. So, for example, we were talking about my fluid gain, and all of a sudden the guy next to me was like, "Oh, Mira, that's better than last week." And I'm like, dude. Well, it was sort of funny. It meant to me that there is no privacy there. People with COVID are sitting right next to you. You are just like exposed in a scenario, right? That isn't private. Like I said, you're sitting right by someone else's chair. You can see across from you. It's a very cold, sterile building. So here's an already bad situation becoming worse.
Is this similar to like plasma donation or something like that, at least in terms of the room that you're in?
I don't know. I've never done that. But it's very similar to what I've seen Red Cross do.
Sure. Yeah, which is pretty similar. So like blood donation, but you're all kind of in a gurney next to each other, lined up.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Pretty much the situation.
And I think they just don't understand, or if they do, there's no excuse for that. They shouldn't treat it the same, and they really need to understand how personal this is to people going through it. Dialysis isn't like you're donating blood or plasma. This is your life on the line, and this is what's keeping you alive. This is an emotional roller coaster for you, isn't it?
And it's slowly killing me all at the same time.
Right.
Hemodialysis is very bad for someone. It's bad for the heart. It's bad for the body. It's tough. I could switch to parodialysis, which is you could do it at your home. It's a catheter in your stomach. But the thing is you have to have that installed, still do the hemo with your other port. So there's a surgery, one. Then after 4 weeks, when that starts working, then you have to have the other port taken out. There's surgery too. Why would I do that to myself if I'm so close to a donor? Dialysis is just, anyone that does dialysis is a very brave person, Bo. I look at these people that sit across from me. It's very bittersweet because I've become friends with some of them. Because finally on my second time, one of the dudes was like, "Hey, new girl." I'm like, "Oh," because before that nobody was speaking. Because you're the new person. You're the new kid in class. And class is awful. You know, you got nurses, techs. They're out there too, working very hard. And so you can tell when some of them are in an argument with the other one, and they flat out are like arguing in front of people. Or there was one tech, for example, if he didn't like someone, he would like flat out announce it, as he like walked away from them. So it's just been a ride. The other day they forgot to turn my machine on for a half hour. So I was just sitting there connected, not doing a dang thing. And the PA is like, "Why is your machine blinking and why aren't you on?" Oh, like I know. So she got, she fixed that. Or for example, the other day, someone else was picked up by an ambulance because they forgot to up her temperature on her machine. And so her blood pressure was out of control. Higher the temperature, lower the blood pressure. And her blood pressure was like way into the 200s. So then she had to go because they forgot to do something, and she had to go to the hospital.
It's ridiculous,
It's sad.
I feel like a lot of that is the quality of the workers that they have. It seems on the lower end, in my opinion. Is that due to funding? Like, what's your experience with this? I mean, all of this is community funded or insurance funded, right?
Insurance for the most part. And really, a lot of these people are on Medicare and Medicaid. I am also now as a secondary insurance. Bo, like the center tries to cut hours. They try to cut times. So, for example, it gets cleaned off with iodine. And sometimes they don't leave enough time to let it dry. Well, they don't have enough time to be spending with you. So they just put on a piece of Tegaderm, tape over it, call it a day. Now I'm going to itch this. I'm itching this because I didn't have the iodine didn't dry underneath. So they're cutting times. They're cutting hours. They cut hours at the end of the night. So now we all have to come in earlier. So now what that means is on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I start work way early. And then I leave at like 3:15 to go to dialysis. And they were like, "You need to be here 15 minutes earlier." I'm like, "Look, I'm not going to be here 15 minutes earlier. This is impossible for me."
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what's going on.
So frustrating.
Frustrating, Bo.
Where are we at right now? You're so close, but how close is it in reality? I mean, you hear these things. I feel like we're in a better place because it's Illinois, the University of Illinois. How are you feeling about things?
So my coordinator from University of Illinois called on Saturday night, 7:30 at night. But it doesn't matter if they call at 2 o'clock in the morning. You answer that phone call, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And she was in a particularly good mood. And, oh, sorry, Bo. There goes my dogs. So I am so close that it is sitting with my insurance right now to get me back active on that list. And so my amazing surgeon went in, did some footwork, wrote a letter to them. He is all about this transplant thing. He's like, "This transplant will help heal you. Like overall, not just a new kidney, right? And all these toxins going on in my body,
right?
But it will help heal me." And I've seen that, I follow a transplant like group blog, mm-hmm. And I've seen these people be like, "My life is totally different. I have energy. I don't have to take binder pills when I eat food that, by the way, dye anything you touch and your mouth red." My acupuncturist says to me, he like says, "Stick out your tongue." And he's like, "Whoa, your tongue's like dyed purple and red." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's from my pills." He's like, "Oh, okay, well, that test isn't going to work." I'm like, okay. And I do acupuncture, Bo, because it was recommended to me by a director of transplant. And she said, I'm not telling you to do it, but I'm telling you I think it helped me. And Bo, it has helped me. But now keep in mind, that's another out-of-pocket cost.
Mm-hmm.
So every 2 weeks, that's $150. So some of these out-of-pocket costs, prescriptions, etc. But on the list, he wrote that letter that they needed, that he did a surgery, and that he believes I am ready to go for transplant. Those were his exact words in his letter. And I got that over to the transplant department, and then she called Saturday night and said she's getting everything resubmitted to my insurance again. My insurance company's probably like, here's this girl coming through again. And so that's right now will take 10 to 12 days. And then I'll be active on the list again, is the plan. Yeah.
So where are you going to be on the list then? I mean, you've been waiting for a year plus. Are you going to get that one of those top spots, hopefully?
Hopefully, because I've been on dialysis now for so long, since October, that'll count. As well as I have a rare blood type, Bo, I'm B positive. So I do match anyone B or O, but it gets a little bit tricky because I have antibodies in my system based on some blood transfusions I've had to have because my hemoglobin was so low because my kidneys aren't working. So, Bo, at this point, we're on 7 blood transfusions. And iron gives me this, like, I'm not a headache person, I feel bad for people that always, I talk about getting migraines, but I've never had like a headache or like something. Well, this iron infusion, it gives you, like, you are pounding in the front of your head for a good couple hours. And they're like, well, that's just you. That's how your body's handling this. So my body has had enough, Bo, frankly. And being on that list is very important to me, not only for myself, for if it is a deceased donor, I'm very appreciative, to that person, their family, those tough decisions that have to be made in life. We're talking about power of attorney. I'm not all that close with my dad, even though I wish it was different. He is my power of attorney, but I feel bad. I mean, he's 65 years old. Does he want to, have to take care of me or give someone directives? But now, Bo, during all this, I've had to do that. I've had to make a will. I've had to have I had a will, but I had to redo it. Directives. I've written my obituary at this point. And my dad has all of those things that would need to be submitted.
Let's talk a little bit about that. I am friends with you on Facebook and follow you since you and I became friends with the first podcast. I've seen you go through stages, if you will. What do you recognize with those stages, and how has this been for you? Because I feel like I've been watching you prepare to die and getting all of your eggs in order, or ducks in order. And I encourage you not to do that, even though you need to do that, because I want you to be in the mindset of fighting and striving, and you're going to live. But at the same time, you have to prepare, because if you don't, that's so irresponsible. Correct. So it's a dichotomy that you're probably stuck in, isn't it? I mean, how is that for you?
It makes life sad. I've had to determine what to do about my dogs if something were to happen to me. And people don't agree with my decision. And that's really unfortunate, but I have made my decision. I am very strong in my directives. I was very fortunate to grow up with my grandparents. I mean, don't get me wrong, my parents were involved I lived with my parents, but I spent weekends, time during the week at my grandparents' farm, and I was so fortunate for that. Like, those are some of the best memories in my life, right? But, Bo, at the same time, and I'm trying not to cry, At the same time, that's where I want my ashes spread. And I've asked my dad to do it alone, or him and my stepmom, because I don't want this big production. Some days it would be easier to not be here than to be here. Days that I can't sit up in bed. Days that all of a sudden you go to your walker and you hit the floor because you had your medicine and you passed out. Mm-hmm. It's miserable. Waiting for an ambulance is miserable. Knowing that they are going to try to get an IV in you in the ambulance and you know it's not going to happen. Or hospitals that argue about where to put in an IV. Like, I know for a fact below the elbow, I'll blow out those IVs. You give me 2 minutes, the IV's going to be blown. If you can even stick me with it.
What's that mean, just for our listeners?
So I have to get, if you go to the hospital, you get different IVs or blood that needs to be taken to get antibiotics or on the off chance fluid, which makes me cringe, so that they can give that to you, or pain meds through your IV. But I'm in chronic pain. Like, my kidneys hurt, my body hurts just from being weak. And those stages are miserable, but then you get poked 100 times while they're trying to find a place to put something. And it's painful. And by blowing out an IV, what I mean there is the IV no longer works. Like, your veins have just blown out what they are trying to put into you. IVs have gotten more painful also because they're pulling on them, trying to get them to work in your arm. It's just miserable.
As we talked, I had a thought about how this has changed you. And we had talked, privately about relationships and the things that are important to you versus what was important before. And I really connected with that because after my accident, I went through the same thing. I got a new sense of priorities and what was important to me. And you don't realize how ski you are from where you want to be until you have this life crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
You bet. So, Bo, I'm not saying I wasn't empathetic before, but I have become more empathetic now. Just as a person for other people, when someone walks in now, like with a walker somewhere, I'm like, oh man, instead of looking at them and just like bypassing it, I'm like, can I help? How can I help you? Mm-hmm. And so that is a phrase that I now use is, how can I help? Even though there's some things I can't do, maybe I'll get somebody who can help. Mm. Or a sense of direction for somebody. But I'm more empathetic with people. But that also, Bo, ties into my priorities. I've gotten to see who's a real friend and who's not, which kind of sucks. So went through that, or who I can count on and who I can't. And people that say that they will be there and then they're not. Mm. Or, Bo, it's important to me that when someone says they're showing up today, that they actually show up. Because then when they don't, some things have gone undone. And I certainly can't be trying them myself, right? Bo, I got real fortunate. I have a good friend since I was 20. So, just like a year. And she really stepped up when she found out what was going on, and she looked at me and she's like, you look ill. She, every week, she or her mother-in-law make food for the week. They are here. She cleans once a week, vacuums, sweeps. She's got 2 kids. Very busy. They have activities every single night of the week. But she still shows up. Bo. And
Who is
that
this
means,
person? Let's give recognition where recognition's due, if you don't mind.
yeah, Shauna Huey. I can't say enough about what has happened, and the way she was really stepped up. And then her mother-in-law, Jackie Huey. Um, and they're great. And I know her husband Hogan, and he helps too. Trying to get my walker in the car when we're going somewhere, or what we're doing. It has just been amazing. And then I have another friend. Her name is Sarah Anderson. Bo, she takes days off work to take me to surgery and stay here with me to take care of me this past time. So she took 3 days off work.
It's amazing.
Bo, I couldn't have done it without her.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah's very much like me. She doesn't put up with much. She'll ask questions. And, that's what happened at the hospital. She asked a couple questions after I got out of surgery. And otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to come home that night.
Let me interject just a couple things. So, in my own experience, and we had this talk just the other day, and, it's a combination of when people get sick or they're going through something that it's a life crisis, for lack of better words. People tend to, if you're sick, somebody might see you once or twice and they felt like they've done their duty,
yes. Yes.
And so they're very reluctant to actually stick with you through the thick and thin of it. And again, we were talking about how you can count your friends on one hand, and I felt like you were so fortunate because you have many people, many more than average, especially at your young age of 21, to count as blessings, and it's important for me to, like I said, acknowledge those people because, it's the butterfly effect. It's those acts of kindness that seem to go the longest distance. Do you agree?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. There's been a benefit. There's been a GoFundMe page. There's hashtag teammira.
Yeah.
So it's great that all these people are willing to help, and I really feel like if I said, hey, I really need this prescription, can somebody get it for me, which has happened, and my buddy Tom's gone and gotten it, Ashton's gone and gotten them, Caitlin's gone and gotten them. I need these people because I couldn't do that. I couldn't walk into the CVS Target, right? Technically I am homebound. So that means besides for doctor's appointments, which obviously are walker, wheelchair, knee scooter. Right now I'm too weak to use the knee scooter that I have, which is incredible, but I can't stay balanced on it, unfortunately. And which before I could, those people have to then help get those in and out of the car. And there's only a certain number of people I trust to go with somewhere. Because I know that if I fall down, they're there. Mm-hmm. Not that they're gonna necessarily pick me up. I mean, don't get me wrong, most of them would try, but they're there to do something. Two of my best friends since middle school, Tammy and Teresa, they come usually once a month also, and do whatever they need to while they're here. They're busy too, Bo. They have 2 kids also, sports activities every night, plus their own things that going on in life.
Life gets busy, and there's only so much time in the day. So I get it. And that's where it's really a blessing that you have such a good support network.
Natasha, for example, but when I go to the hospital, she stays here with my dogs. I couldn't do that without her.
Yeah.
Or she's come and sat in the ER with me for 6 hours. Caitlin's gone to doctor's appointments with me, but she's a home health aide, right?
But I feel like the hospitals and such expect that everybody has that. or expects
Correct.
the community to pull that weight. And that's where the disconnect is, where we need to have programs that offer home care, not friends or family, because there's
Correct.
people that fall in the cracks of the system, and that's what I see often, which is just horrible. So
Horrible.
I feel like this, you hit it on the head before, this home care coordination, not only for people that are, so home care coming in is one thing, but having also them like an umbrella coordinating your care, taking all those stresses that you've gone through off of your shoulders and having an actual advocate. There's ombudsmans and advocates, that you can get, but they all cost money. And the only way that you can get an ombudsman is if literally you have cancer or something like that. Otherwise, even in the worst of situations, those patients are unable to get any kind of advocacy, which blows my mind too. I would think that having coordination and bringing these often loose strings because the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, or this department doesn't know what that department did, or there's many scenarios that fall into that. But this idea of coordinating care, I think, is important.
Yes, it's so important. Like, Bo, it would be ideal, like, that kidney failure has its own program too. I mean, there's a National Kidney Foundation, but more like when you're in the hospital, like, okay, here's how we're getting her home. Here's how we're going to help. Here's a list of places you can call. And, just that would be so helpful. Mm-hmm. It would have made my life so much easier, because now I'm stressed out about all this, right? And now let's talk about medical rides, Bo. So at one point I was so weak I needed those medical rides. Well, I was told by the ADRC coordinator that was trying to help me, the disability coordinator, that a ride to Madison one way is $200 and back another $200. Then I was referred to Rock County Transit, and calling them, the guy was a jerk, really not helpful at all. Like, I don't know, I think we're too busy during your dialysis time to help you. And it was $12 each way. So at that point I was using, it's called LME. Sometimes she would show up, sometimes she wouldn't. It was $40 to Janesville. It was $48 to Janesville and back to the house. So for a medical ride that day, it was over $100 for dialysis. Speaking of dialysis, I mentioned Janesville and Madison. So I went to Janesville because it's closer for a little while. I transferred there, right, because I was so weak I couldn't get to Madison. And, of course, I wasn't paying $400 3 times a week, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Bo, the care was much worse. So I actually asked for a transfer back to Madison. My blood pressure was very high at the time. It's not anymore, but it was very high at the time, well into the 220s. And I had asked for a particular medicine. And the PA said to me, "I'm new. I don't know if I can do that." And I was like, please never tell that to a patient. Please never say that to someone. So it took like 3 days to get the prescription that I needed to bring my blood pressure down. In the meantime, it was pulling at my heart. I was in physical pain. I sleep on a heating pad on my heart still to kind of help ease that pain, that pull from the dialysis port.
Is it supposed to pull like that? Is that common, or is it too short and it's just pulling because they didn't give it enough length?
Well, Bo, it's been replaced once. Oh, so geez. The nurses are like, this thing is jammed into you. It was a 0.5. It was too short. So it was pulling at my heart and it was jammed in. You could see it was jammed into my skin, right? So went in. Bo, it's the same doctor that walks in. He's like, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "Because I need a longer catheter, I guess. I don't know. I'm here for surgery." Like, it was scheduled. Dude, I haven't eaten in like 12 hours. Like, just do this. And for a type 1 diabetic, that's difficult to not eat and then manage their insulin all at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, well, I don't think you need a longer port or catheters. I'm like, dude, this thing is pulling at my heart. And you could see it was jammed in my skin. And so he put in a 0.6 that has helped a little bit. But generally speaking, there are others who they say have the same complaint, that it pulls at the atrium of their heart. That's exactly what it's doing.
Yeah, and I can't imagine how that feels, especially,
It's miserable.
We've gone through most of what I know to get us current for our listeners. The thing that we're really waiting on, I think, already happened, which is getting you back on the donor list.
Right.
And now it's just kind of a matter of time, from my understanding. The thing that I think about too is I think you talked a little bit about it. You're talking about how you're a unique blood type. And so you've gotten, is it coupons so that you can swap for
vouchers?
Okay, vouchers. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so vouchers kind of help bump you up on the list. And I have quite a few vouchers, which is great for the National Kidney Foundation. But it has to be at certain hospitals only. One of them is, unfortunately, University of Illinois is not on that list. One of them is UW Health. And Bo, so once you are off their list and you get this letter that you are done, like you can't move forward, you can reapply in 6 months. Bo, I can reapply now, but I'm not going to. And if in turn that means that I die waiting, then so be it. I've lost 2 friends during this process. One to kidney and liver failure, and the other one to kidney and heart failure. And unfortunately, with the kidney and heart failure, my friend Jack, who passed away, they weren't able to do dialysis based on a heart medication he was getting. So he needed dialysis badly. They couldn't give it to him, and unfortunately, Jack passed away. And Lonnie passed away of kidney and liver failure. So it's been a rough road to watch this and think to myself, okay, why am I still here when these 2 went? Mm-hmm. So it's difficult for me to just be in that headspace. And Bo, you do a positive job of always making me laugh or smile. But some days I don't want to talk to anybody. Like, you might notice this, my messages will go on red. Or it's because I just can't. I just can't.
I am the type of person that just wants to take that injured thing and swoop it up and take care of you. I feel that very much with you. I told you, I'd try to move the world if I could. And while I've done every trick I knew to do, I couldn't move it as much as I wanted to. And that's been one thing that's weighed on my heart, I guess, a little bit. But at the end of it, maybe the blessing that I bring to the table is sharing these stories, and giving people that platform to be able to tell their stories, because at the end of the day, we're all important because we're all human,
Oh, for sure.
And
your podcasts are amazing. And it really gets us a true story out there that's not edited. Like, here's what's really happened with this center. Mm-hmm. And you do such a great job at your podcast, and the people that come in. You and I have been talking about another story about somebody
Mm-hmm.
that could possibly do a podcast based on her experiences with disability and transplant as well.
Digital voices, the reason that I said digital voices is, one person can scream as loud as they want, and it's very hard to hear them. But you get a stadium worth of people screaming at like any football game that you've ever gone to. How far away can you hear those people cheering?
Right.
And so it's really hard to ignore voices, when you put them together, which is what this podcast is all about, and trying to take these loose strings to create a rope for change. I think that's what I try to bring to the table. And, it takes cooperation though, awareness, transparency, but we need that last component, which is accountability, not only for people in charge currently so that things can change, but also for the victims that this has affected. The mental health component of this is something that I can't stress enough about how damaging it is for anyone who's going through something as serious as, being on a donor list waiting for, a recipient organ, and then you have all of these other frustrations on top of it. It's hard enough just to go through it, and then you add all of these hoops and hurdles, and it sometimes seems designed to discourage people from even finishing the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these appointments, people jump right off. They're like, I can't do this. Which, that's terrible. And speaking of your podcast, Bo, I had my friend Rachel said to me, Miranda, I listened to your last entire hour and a half podcast. And I was like, you did? And she's like, it was great. And I was like, oh, okay.
And now we got you on video.
And she's like, and I cried. I'm like, oh, geez. Yeah. And here this time I'm on video. Yeah.
It's, it's amazing. I've just been blessed. The network of people that I've met, yourself included. I've told you many times how inspired I've been by you. Sometimes I hate to say it, I used to be a little bit of a pity party guy, and I remind myself, like, how dare I, and there's another guest that I had that was really inspiring too, Virginia Solomons, and she's this lady from South Africa that was put on fire as a child and with petrol, I believe, and was burned over 95% of her body. And so when I first started recovering from my accident, and well, I shouldn't say first, it was several years later, I ended up interviewing this lady, and she was so inspiring. She talked about how to live with your scars, scars and all, and loving yourself regardless. And those are the things that, inspired me. And selfishly, a lot of the guests that I've had on the show have been on my show for selfish reasons, whether it was motivational speakers or some interest that I had, and it's just bloomed from there. So thank you for enjoying it, and I'm glad that people are getting something out of this, because I don't make a dime. I spend a lot to do it, but it's so rewarding. It's the most rewarding thing I've ever had in my life. So thank you.
Oh, Bo. Well, thank you for having me and doing an update.
I want to see a third one after we do the transplant.
Yeah.
I told you the other day, I'm like, use some of my energy. I could see you're down, and I'm glad that I can make you smile. It's makes me feel good that I can have that effect, and it's also nice to know that you have someone else up there looking after you, in some way. So
for sure, but more people are helpful, and especially ones with very positive attitudes, makes a world of difference.
It's all about, a lot of it is self-prophecy. If you say, oh, I'm so sick of this, then you're probably going to get sick of it. Preaching or self-prophesying with that cup half full philosophy goes a long way in life.
For sure it does. Yep. And that's something I've learned along the way too, Bo, is try to find the positive in things. Sometimes I have to make a list so that I can reference or go back to it if I need to. Something I learned at work actually long ago was, at the end of the day, to make a list of 5 things you are grateful for. And sometimes, like, Bo, you've landed on the list. The podcast has landed on the list. There's a lot of things that have landed on that list that I go back and reference, and when I'm having a bad day, which does happen. Today, happens to be kind of a good day, except for I have dialysis now that I need to leave for in 7 minutes. But watching the podcast, being a part of them, they're inspirational. They really are, and that's helpful.
60 seconds, and I'll let you go. We talked a lot about, state of mind and staying positive. Are there things that you do that have helped you stay hopeful and positive during this difficult time?
Definitely making that list, 5 things that you are grateful for. Sometimes they're very little things that land on the list, right? But I couldn't do them otherwise. So making a list, I do some sitting yoga because I can't get on the floor because I can't get back up. And not because I'm so young, but because I physically can't get back up. Right. I had to buy a recliner that is like a power recliner. So that was a purchase in life I never thought I would have to make. So some things that I've done, is that I can get up and down. I can, I fell one time and I was able to get to the recliner at its lowest setting, put myself on it, and pick me back up. And I was like, wow, this just happened, Yeah. So things that you can do, that list, positive people, some changes like getting that chair have made a difference.
Well, I hope that you're surprised with how strong you can be, even at your weakest. I think that's when we find out how strong we truly are. So with that said, I thank you for coming on again today and giving us an update. I'm pulling for you along with thousands of other people. And
thank you.
And, it's together, hopefully, with sharing these experiences that will bring change into what used to be, in my opinion, a great state.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right. I will let you go for your dialysis, and you have yourself a great day. We'll talk again soon, okay?
Thanks, Bo. You too.
Welcome.
This has been Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany, exploring deep stories from real-life guests with real-life experiences, providing insight to our listeners with every story. Stay up to date on future podcasts by bookmarking Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany.podbean.com and follow Bo on social media by searching Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Have an idea for a future story? Send your idea to acrmadison@gmail.com. Until next time, grab life by the horns and keep inspiring others.